This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek, and I'm talking with David Van Deusen, who's president of the Vermont State AFL-CIO, and his state federation took a number of decisions prior to the election because they were concerned about the threat of a coup and insurrection, which actually was being incited by Trump, the Trump administration. So welcome to our program.
Pleasure to be with you again, Steve.
So maybe you can go over why your state federation felt the need to have a discussion about the danger of a coup and an insurrection, and why you took the decision to support the idea of a general strike to stop such an action by Trump.
Well, first and foremost, because we actually believe in democracy. And when a sitting president of the United States of America, in this case Donald Trump, starts telling neo-fascists to stand by and claims that he was the rightful winner, when by every single possible measure, even according to his own Justice Department, he clearly lost the election, then we take that threat seriously. And when we took the vote in November of 2020 as a state federation to authorize our executive board to call for a general strike in the event of a political coup in our country, a fascist coup in our country, we saw the writing on the wall. Trump was already laying the groundwork for the January insurrection in the Capitol. He was already asserting very dubious legal arguments that the vote somehow was unfair or fraudulent, which is shown by every measure not to be the case. And he was already in conversations with various Republican-led state legislatures to seek to have them send alternative electors that did not actually represent who the folks in their state voted for to the Electoral College. So this was very real. And when we saw this happening, believing in democracy, we thought and continue to believe that it was our moral and political responsibility as a labor movement to take any and all steps within our power to prepare to defend the democracy we have within our republic. So at our November 2020 convention, we posed the question. We put forth a general strike resolution, and this was discussed and debated by leaders and rank-and-file members throughout Vermont of the labor unions, and it was adopted by 87% of our delegates who were present. And in that case, it authorized the elected executive board to call for a general strike if there was a fascist coup. So we are proud of what we did. We will do the same thing again if democracy comes into crisis. And we very strongly assert that that's the job of organized labor, to, among other things, defend democracy. And when folks from the national AFL-CIO leadership, who apparently don't agree with us, such as President Richard Trumka, then politically retaliate against us, threaten us, launch politically motivated investigations against us for daring to have that general strike vote, we have to question their own loyalty to democracy itself. So this is where we stand now. Our federation, 90% of our time is spent organizing and doing political work here on the ground and trying to build a real rank-and-file progressive labor movement within the Green Mountains. But we also are standing up to the national AFL-CIO and Richard Trumka, who doesn't believe that democracy is worth defending. So that's where we stand, Steve, and that's the reality of today, June 2021.
And Trump and his supporters, and millions of people who support him, still believe the election was rigged. They're still organizing to overturn the election results with these new audits. It seems that there's a increasing danger that there's going to be another effort. You've tried to reach out to other unions. You've been reaching out to unions around the country and trying to get support in the labor movement. What should trade unions around the country who are also concerned about the threat of a fascist coup or effort in this country do to support your efforts and the efforts of other unions around the country to deal with this issue?
Well, look, right now, our executive vice president here in Vermont, Tristan Adee, from the American Federation of Government Employees, she has been diligently having conversations with labor leaders from around the United States, but not just about asking for support against this reactionary pushback from Richard Trumka that we're suffering, but also, and much more importantly, I might add, to work with us to seek to build a progressive caucus within the National AFL-CIO that is committed to creating real reform within the labor movement. Because we don't believe that it's simply enough to defend those aspects of democracy we have in this country. Being true believers of democracy, we also believe that it's our responsibility to build real democracy within the labor movement. And the fact that a national president could attack an entire state federation because apparently we have different commitment levels, shall I say, to democracy, is on a national scale is telling. So we need real change within the National AFL-CIO. We need to democratize the organization. We need to give rank-and-file workers a true voice within their own labor movement. And we need to fight to make the labor movement more committed to social justice unionism, whereby we don't only fight for the narrow self-interest of our members, which we will, but that we also fight for the common good for all workers throughout the United States and beyond. So that's the task before us today, and that's what we are working to achieve here with the Vermont AFL-CIO discussions with labor folks from all 50 states.
And the filibuster now that is being supported by the Republicans with some Democrats would make it, virtually impossible to stop this attack on democratic rights, to vote, which are being attacked, would also stop the PRO Act from being passed. What do you think about this use of the filibuster and the fact that if you rely simply on the politicians to get this done, it's not going to happen?
Look, the filibuster needs to go. It needs to have been gone a long time ago. But if there's anybody who gives a damn about defending our voting rights, if there's anybody that gives a damn about passing the PRO Act or having a chance to pass the PRO Act, we need to get rid of the filibuster. But here's the thing. The Democratic Party, who I might add, all of which does not support the PRO Act, there's 3 Democratic senators who still oppose it, so there's not even a majority there if the filibuster was gone. But the Democrats that do support it, a critical mass of them don't support getting rid of the filibuster. So it's less than words on paper saying you support pro-union agenda if you're not willing to take action to achieve it. Now, look, when Obama was president, do you remember something called the Employee Free Choice Act?
Yes.
That was essentially card check on the national scale that would make it easier, more democratic, better way for folks to form unions. That went nowhere. We heard a lot about it on the campaign trail, and when push came to shove and the Democrats were in power, it went exactly nowhere. Richard Trumka and the National AFL-CIO have spent tens of millions of dollars electing Democrats to office all throughout this country, including Joe Biden, and promised that this would be the result. We're going to get the PRO Act passed. We're actually going to move in the right direction with labor rights. And yet, where is it? I don't see it. And you know what? It's probably not coming. And don't misunderstand me. We had a big rally up here in Vermont on May Day where we spoke. We stood in front of 500 workers in the State House lawn and spoke about our firm support for the PRO Act. And we stand by it all the way. The problem is the Democratic Party is not a friend of labor. So when we put all of our resources into electing, a massive amount of resources into electing Democrats to Washington, D.C., and year in, year out, decade in, decade out, they fail to deliver on meaningful change, progressive change that would positively impact working people, well, I say that's not good enough. And we need the National AFL-CIO. We need folks who are leading the National AFL-CIO to wake up. They need to see this, and they have to understand that our power is not with suits and ties in Washington. It is not with spending our hard-earned money on lobbyists and on elections for candidates that don't really support us. We need to be putting our time, our energy, and resources into organizing, into building community relations, and to expanding the base from which the organized labor represents workers across this country. And that's something that has not been adequately done by the national AFL-CIO in generations, and that needs to change.
And in the United States, there have been histories of general strikes, particularly when workers were organizing in the 1930s. There was a general strike in Minneapolis, July 20th, actually. There was a general strike in San Francisco, was started on July 5th. There was a general strike in Oakland, the last one in the United States, in 1946. What were the lessons of those strikes? Because it seems that millions of workers did get organized during the 30s, despite the use of the National Guard and massive mobilization against them. They were able to get organized. Is that still possible today with Amazon and these Goliath corporations?
Of course it's possible, unless you think that American workers are somehow inferior to workers around the world. When there's a collective will, there is a way. We don't have to look too far to see examples of general strikes taking place on a significant scale in nations. Within recent days, the Palestinians had a general strike across their territories, and the occupied territories, I should say, in and around Israel. So that was a massive show of popular solidarity, which, by the way, was not called for initially by organized labor itself within those constituencies. That was something that came up from below, which I find interesting. But that was a powerful statement against the apartheid state of modern right-wing Israel. And we could also point to, not long ago, also weeks ago, the general strike in Myanmar, which, of course, is continuing to resist a military coup which took place against an elected government there. And ironically, I may add, that Richard Trumka and the National AFL-CIO recently had a seminar talking about our support for the general strike in Myanmar. So I find it a little confounding that Trumka would support a general strike for a coup that happened in Southeast Asia, but instead of embracing our need to defend our own democracy here in the United States, he will instead retaliate against any union or organization which seeks to organize towards that end in defense of our own democracy.
And the international work of the AFL-CIO is done through the Solidarity Center, which gets over $30 million a year from the National Endowment for Democracy. Do you think that has anything to do with the fact that the AFL-CIO and the Solidarity Center would be supporting the idea of a general strike in Myanmar, but apparently is not doing anything around the general strike movement in this country against a threatened coup?
Look, world politics and economics have to do with all this. It's no mistake that Richard Trumka and his leadership in the National AFL-CIO is essentially silent on the genocide going on among the Palestinian people at the hands of the right-wing Israeli government and what have you. So that's no mystery. And then when we look at Myanmar, of course we should be supporting that general strike. Of course, when a military coup takes place and workers rise up and say that's not acceptable, we should get behind that, and we should be behind that all the way. But it's a little more nuanced than that, too. Now, if you delve into the Democratic Party or the National League for Democracy, which was in charge, which was elected to office, rightly elected to office in Myanmar, we could also see that they adopt a number of neoliberal policies which would benefit the world capitalist class. So perhaps there is a little self-interest there to publicly state support for workers in that country, but not in Palestine and not in the United States. But look, for me, the question of democracy, be it representational democracy or something more, something better, is worth fighting for. And we will lose it if we don't fight for it, if we're not willing to fight for it. If there's positioned to win that fight. Let's not forget that just days ago, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn publicly stated that there needs to be a military coup in this country like in Myanmar. He said that. This is a retired high-ranking officer from the U.S. military. And what action has thus far meaningfully been taken against him? I don't see it. There's rumblings of potentially a court-martial or some such thing, or maybe taking his pension away, which is a joke, if that's the best we can do. And let's look at Donald Trump right now, who is right now publicly claiming that he's going to be returned to office in August of this year. That's unprecedented, and it's if it wasn't so dangerous, I'd say it's insane. But that's the far right, violent far right, fascist right in this country is on the rise. The Donald Trump did not disappear because from office on January 20th. These threats are very present and they're very real. And all they need to see is an unwillingness of people like us, workers, unwillingness to stand up and push back and say, no, that's not going to happen. To see, if they were to see that weakness, that brings them even closer to being able to conceptualize what it would take to carry out a coup in this country. These are dangerous times, and we have to take them seriously.
And we're speaking to David Van Deusen. He is the president of the Vermont AFL-CIO. Now, there have been challenges to some of the practices or the issue of democracy in the AFL-CIO. Sarah Nelson, who's president of the Flight Attendants Union, CWA unit. Has there been any national support on this issue from her or other national leaders of the AFL-CIO?
We have been in contact with President Nelson. She supports our cause. She supports our right to exercise democracy within our federation, and we look forward to having more dialogue with her. We've had great conversations with International President of APWU, Mark Diamondstein, who is also firmly in support of creating a more progressive labor movement with more real rank-and-file democracy. So there's definitely a movement towards in the correct direction within labor. The question is, will we be able to muster the critical mass of rank-and-file support needed, active rank-and-file support needed, to overcome the undemocratic processes inherent within the present National AFL-CIO to change the leadership next year at our convention? And will we be able to take it to the next level and change the Constitution to make it more democratic once we get in? But, Steve, another thing that I think, we're talking about democracy, that we really need to talk about here is everything can't be just about the defending democracy we have. We need to go much further. We need to go on the offensive to build more democracy. The representational democracy that exists in most of this country, and I say most because we have elements in New England and Vermont of a direct democracy through our town meeting systems. But we need to go further. We need to take more power out of the hands of elected officials and put it in the hands of actual people, like our town meeting system in Vermont. And we need to find ways to further democratize the workplace. I mean, they tell us it is a democracy, but at the same time, if you're not in a union, you essentially work under dictatorship for 8 to 10 hours a day. So that has to change too. We need to go on the offensive when it comes to democracy. We need to put an end to the type of social organization that ownership benefits from the labor of all of us. We need to give the real power to the people. We need to make real fundamental change that we cannot deliver on. And we can't do that by relying on political parties alone. We need to put our resources, our time, our energy, our efforts into organizing in the shops, organizing in the factories, organizing at the job sites, and organizing in our communities with community allies. That's how we're going to grow power. That's how we're going to make change.
Okay, well, it seems like more and more workers are fed up and angry with the conditions that they're facing, and there's a real openness to join unions and build a labor movement. So I want to thank you for joining us on this discussion about not just Vermont, but the future of the labor movement in the United States. So thanks for joining us. We've been speaking with David Van Deusen. He's president of the Vermont AFL-CIO.